This is The Real Estate Dweller with Miguel Pagan, the podcast that's all about real estate. For more than 2 decades, Miguel Pagan has been at the forefront of change in real estate. This podcast will help you navigate through the ever-changing landscape of real estate. Now, here is your host, Miguel Pagan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, The Real Estate Dweller. Today's theme is a very important one: how to purchase a home without going into the poorhouse. As a professional real estate agent, I have the privilege to meet and work with all kinds of different buyers: first-time buyers, move-up buyers, investors, or those that are seeking to become investors. Yet it's very surprising to me how little thought is given to the actual process of purchasing a home and how that process can actually affect your future. You make a good choice, and your future improves by leaps and bounds. Make the wrong choice, and you're well on your way to the poorhouse. So what should you consider before taking the steps to purchase a home? How do finances affect that decision? Do you have enough savings? How much is enough? To make sure that I'm bringing you value, I've invited an expert in the mortgage world, Gaetano Ciambrello. Now, I call him Guy. By the way, he's Italian. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Guy. Guy joined AFC Mortgage Group in 2019 after working at Citigroup Global Markets, where he worked on the fixed income trading floor. Guy graduated from Fordham with his BA in finance in 2019. Guy is focused on originations and helping home buyers understand the mortgage financing process. AFC Mortgage is a family-owned business, and Guy currently lives in Trumbull. So Guy, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure having you here on our podcast, The Real Estate Dweller. You look very young, too young to be such an experienced mortgage lender. How old are you?
I'm actually 23, so I'm definitely on the younger side. I got licensed when I was actually in college. So I've been licensed now for over 3 years, and it's been great so far. So I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. And for those that are watching this through YouTube, do not let the youthful appearance fool you. This guy is like a ninja when it comes to mortgages. So it's an absolute pleasure having you here. I'm looking forward to our interview.
Awesome. Looking forward to it, Miguel. Thank you again.
Now, Guy, I firmly believe that the very step that anyone should take before they purchase a home is to actually contact a real estate agent, obviously for self-serving reasons. But I want to take it from your perspective. Let's look at this process from the perspective of a lender. And what are your tips that you will give buyers to make sure that when they purchase a home, they're not bankrupting their future? So, Guy, before a buyer actually sets out to purchase a home, what do you feel is the first step they should take?
So the first thing, Miguel, when a buyer or a person realizes that they want to buy a home, is getting pre-approved and looking at their finances to understand what they're going to be able to afford and what they're going to be comfortable with paying each month. So if someone wants to buy a home, they'll come to a lender and they'll ask to get pre-approved. A pre-approval is where a lender looks at income, assets, and credit. We dive into all 3 aspects of those. We also look at a full picture of what other investment accounts or savings that this borrower has. And by doing the pre-approval, the borrower is going to be able to walk away knowing what they're going to be able to afford for a purchase price, loan amount, down payment, terms of the loan, how much money each month their payment's going to be, how much they're going to need for closing and a down payment. And after leaving a pre-approval meeting, a buyer's ready to go. Not only are they going to be able to submit offers to a home and feel confident that they're going to be able to get an accepted offer and be able to close on that home and move in, but now they can feel confident knowing what they're going to be able to afford and not feel, bankrupt or house poor.
Nice. Now, you guys actually do a very in-depth research of your buyer. I appreciate that because I have gotten letters that have been brought to my office by potential buyers where they actually walked into a bank branch and just stated that they wanted to purchase a home. And they asked a couple of questions about income hey, how's your credit? And they handed them a letter.
Yeah, so that's something we've seen before, and we don't do it. Well, when we speak with a buyer, the first thing we do is have a 10 to 15-minute introduction phone call, understand their goals, understand what they're trying to do, and it gives us a rough idea of where we're going to go, loan programs possibly. But the next step is talking about the income, getting documents. So pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns if they're self-employed or if they own investment property, looking at their assets. So verifying bank statements, investment accounts such as a brokerage account or 401k or IRA, and then pulling credit. And pulling credit, everybody has a credit score. Understanding what your credit score is helpful going into a meeting, a pre-approval meeting, but that's going to determine how much a lender will lend to you, what kind of interest rate you're going to get, how much money you're going to be able to put down. So we verify all of that. And when we give someone a pre-approval letter, they're ready to go. They can submit an offer, feel confident that there's not going to be any fallout, unless something catastrophic, like they lost their job, but there's going to be no fallout from getting a pre-approval to closing on a home.
Very good. And the last thing we want is fallout.
Yeah.
So now
Definitely.
I have a personal preference when it comes to working with buyers. Typically what I do as a real estate agent is I bring them into my office and we go through a little bit of an interview process, and I'll ask a series of questions just to kind of vet them before I actually reach out to a lender and have the lender pre-qualify them. And I feel that saves me, and it probably saves you a lot of time. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a great idea, because if you're able to speak to a buyer and get a quick feel of where that person stands, at least when I have that conversation, I know what to expect, and it at least sets the tone or gives me an idea of what avenue we're going to go with this buyer. Possibly gets me thinking about loan programs, if they're going to need down payment assistance, possible credit score if they have an idea. So it's super helpful for me going into a conversation, having a little bit of background on a buyer.
Very good. So let's go back to the actual process that you follow, and let's talk a little bit about credit scores. What I mean by that is, give me some indication as to what is a good credit score versus a not so good credit score.
Definitely. So a good credit score could be subjective. There's not one good credit score. I'd say though, if you're above 700, that would be considered a good credit score. However, when you're looking at loan programs, there are programs, for example, a conventional loan goes all the way down to 620. An FHA loan goes all the way down to 580 if you want to put down 3.5%. Now, I would recommend, a first-time home buyer, if they can, increase their credit score to 620. But we're happy to help them if their scores are below that, and there are options available. So whenever I speak with someone, I don't want them to feel like there's not a loan program available for them if they don't have perfect credit. And it's an option, especially if they want to buy a home or they're renting and they need to move into something because maybe a lease is expiring or their family's growing. So there's definitely options available with those lower credit scores.
Got you. Now, what about a person that comes in and they don't have a good credit rating because they've had a bankruptcy, a short sale, or a foreclosure in their past? Should they just give up on the buying process?
That's a good question. And the answer is no. The reason for that is different loan programs have different standards for these types of credit events. So we have, bankruptcy, foreclosure, and then there's different kinds of bankruptcies, 7, 11, 13. You have short sales. And for example, if you had a foreclosure for a conventional loan, you're not going to be able to qualify for a new loan for 7 years. But with an FHA loan, it's only 3 years. Now, there's also things such as extenuating circumstances. So I had a buyer who had a husband who had cancer, and 3 years had passed, and she wanted to go, do a conventional loan because she was putting 20% down. She didn't want PMI, and the reason she foreclosed on her home was her husband was sick. He had cancer. He ended up passing away, but she had to leave her job to take care of him. His income went away. So pretty much over the span of 3 years, they lost both of their incomes. They weren't able to afford a home. And that's the reason for the foreclosure. And that was a reason that the underwriter was able to grant extenuating circumstances. So everybody's situation is different. And I think speaking with a lender is a great opportunity to see maybe if you will qualify, because you never know because of each situation being different.
Very good. And I always tell buyers that at the very least, if they speak to the lender, they'll have a clearer understanding as to what it's going to take for them to actually purchase a home down the road.
100% agree. Because if you're not ready right now, at least, we can plan for 3, 6, 12 months, even 2 years, down the road to get you in a place where at that point in time, you'll be ready to buy a home. Whether it's a life event, you no longer want to rent, we can plan for that. And having that conversation, it's never too early.
Excellent. Now, there's many options that buyers actually have when it comes to what type of loans they could actually acquire. Describe some of those products for us.
Definitely. So the biggest right now in the market is a conventional loan. That's probably for a buyer who is, kind of fits within the box of credit lending standards. We also have other programs available that are lower down payment. Conventional actually allows you to go down as little as 3%. FHA is a great loan for first-time home buyers because it, as little as 3.5% down. It has relaxed credit standards, meaning you can go down lower in credit score. It has more flexible debt to income ratios. So maybe someone who doesn't make as much money, or someone who has a lot more debt, maybe student loans, we're seeing a lot of that lately, can afford a higher price point. You have CHFA, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, which allows for down payment assistance, maybe for a buyer who doesn't have any money for a down payment. And the great thing with each of these loans is they're going to fit. They might not fit for every buyer, but every buyer is going to have a specific need. And with all the products out there, it's possible and likely that, you will be able to qualify for one of them.
Gotcha. So in essence, what's the difference between an FHA mortgage and a CHFA mortgage? Just to make it clearer to the audience.
Well, actually, if you get a CHFA loan, it could be an FHA loan. So it's just a Connecticut Housing Finance Authority program that is subsidized by the state of Connecticut. So
Guy, I've heard some things about CHFA loans. Not I heard some things. I know some things about CHFA loans that may concern buyers, first-time home buyers. Restrictions or things that have to do with their actual resale of their property. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Depending on when they buy and the period of when they sell, buyers do need to consider a recapture tax that CHFA will charge them if they were to sell their home. So it all depends on a timeline of when they purchase it and then when they go to sell or refinance. So it's definitely something you have to keep in mind. And it's a percentage that CHFA will charge you once you sell your home.
Very good.
It varies for each year that you sell it.
Gotcha.
The longer you hold it, the lower the tax.
Okay. Now let's shift the conversation a little bit to more having to do with setting yourself up correctly for the future. Now, I heard a popular talk show host say that every buyer should have $100,000 in savings before they purchase a home. How do you feel about that?
I've heard that as well, and I don't agree with it. The reason for that is $100,000 is a lot of money for a down payment. And if somebody's paying rent right now and they want to buy a home, they don't need $100,000. They could do it with as little as 3% down. I'm actually going to pull up a quick presentation. Give me one sec.
Please do.
And this is looking at a borrower who is renting right now and is considering a purchase of $400,000 with 3% down. If you look at this scenario right here, this is they're renting at $2,200 a month, and I'm estimating that their rent is going to go up 3% each year. This is a purchase of $400,000, a down payment of 3%, which is $12,000, a monthly payment of $2,536, so a bit more expensive than renting, but they're paying principal of $666 each month, which is creating equity in their home. Now, if they waited for $100,000 or 20% for a down payment, that can take them years to acquire. If we scroll down, if we look at the rent versus principal paid over a 5-year period, over 60 months, a borrower, if that's, let's say, how long it takes to save, $100,000. A borrower is going to pay $140,000 in rent over that 5-year period. Now, in principal, what are they going to pay? It's going to be $43,000. And that's equity they're building. Now, during this time period as well, their house can go up in value. Over the long term, homes have appreciated, especially the last year or two. So not only are you paying down principal and creating equity that way, but if your home appreciates in value, you're also going to be gaining equity there. Now, every situation's different, but I strongly disagree, though, with waiting for $100,000 because there's loan options available with as little as 3% down. It definitely, I would not advise anyone to think that they need that much money for a down payment.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your answer. Well, what if a person doesn't have any funds for a down payment? How do we handle that?
Definitely. So there's really two things. When we're talking about funds for closing and for a down payment is a possible gift. So a borrower can go get a gift from a family member, a friend, depending on the loan program, or a relative. And what would happen is we would need, let's say for FHA, for example, a borrower needs a $10,000 gift for the down payment. They can go to their mother and ask for the $10,000. We get an executed gift letter stating who the donor is, their address, the amount of the money, the date it was transferred. We get a bank statement from the donor showing money leaving her account, a bank statement from our borrower showing the money entering an account, and now she has $10,000 to use for a down payment. And that's a great way for a first-time home buyer. We see it quite often, might not have the money in the savings themselves, but they're able to get help from family. So that's a great way for getting money for a down payment. Now, the other thing is closing costs. When I speak to first-time home buyers, they have down payment, but they don't realize all the time that there's closing costs involved with the loan as well. There's a bank fee, an appraisal fee, title work and attorney fees, and then there are escrow payments that they have to pay, usually about 6 months, anywhere from 4 to 6 months at closing, which the lender will collect in insurance and taxes. So that could be another 2 to 3% of the purchase price. In that case, what I recommend buyers do, let me see if I can pull this up as well, is a seller credit. And the way this works, let's see, is back to this same example, a $400,000 purchase price. The total money you're going to need for cash to close is $22,800. If you get a seller credit for $8,000, you increase the purchase price by $8,000 from $400 to $408. If we go to more info, go to closing costs, the seller gives you that $8,000 back, so they're still netting $400K, but your total cash to close is going to drop about $8,000 to $15,000. So in this scenario, it breaks down exactly how a buyer might be able to come out of pocket with less money. And for first-time home buyers, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I share a little experience I had with closing costs with another lender, and obviously I'm no longer using that lender, where he wasn't crystal clear on closing costs with the buyer, and the buyer had no clue that she needed closing costs. And we actually put a property under deposit, and I cover closing costs with her in my first interview, but when she met with the lender, he wasn't crystal clear as to how much she needed. And halfway through this transaction, after doing inspections, appraisal have been done, I get a call from the lender saying, hey, she didn't know she needed closing costs. And she was hysterical. We ended up having to go back to the seller. The seller ended up giving us a credit of half of the money. She had to go out and raise that other half. And it was just an emotional roller coaster. We finally got it closed, but it was so difficult because it wasn't clearly explained. And that's what I appreciate about you, that you're crystal clear on how you explain closing costs to your clients.
I appreciate that, Miguel. And it's educating a buyer, especially a first-time home buyer. After you have that initial phone call, we take an application, we request documents, we're verifying those assets to make sure that they're going to have enough for the down payment and closing costs. And then when we do a follow-up call going over the pre-approval and the mortgage plan, which we just saw on the screen that I pulled up, it's customized for each buyer, but we go over that so they know after that call what that number is going to be, within $100, $200, what they can expect to be paying for closing.
Yeah. And then as far as closing costs, the other tip that I will give my audience is that if you need closing costs, that's something that you have to tell your realtor right up front. Don't let them find out halfway through the transaction, because they need to structure that offer with the seller concession built right into the offer. If the seller's not on board, we can't do it. So let's move on to, we talked about closing costs. Let's talk about purchasing a home without actually putting yourself into the poorhouse. And what I mean by that is, what strategies do you actually recommend that your clients follow so that they're set up correctly financially for the future?
Definitely. So there's a few things when I speak with buyers, in that first pre-approval meeting. We have credit guidelines, maximum debt to income ratios that we look at. Around 50%, could go a little bit higher if you're going FHA. And when I'm speaking with a buyer or a couple, let's say, when they're purchasing their first home, we go over how much they're going to be able to afford the max amount. If we completely max out what their payment can be and the purchase price, this is what you're going to be able to afford. Then we take a step back and say, do you really need that? That's the first thing. And are you going to be able to live maybe, let's say, below your means or on one income? God forbid something happened to your husband, or you have kids and your wife is no longer working. Are you going to be able to afford this house with one income? Because you don't want to be house poor. You don't want to buy the largest house possible and then not be able to do other things. And that's something we bring up as well, because not everyone thinks about it. They think they can afford a $700,000 home, but then do you not want to be able to go out to dinner on a Friday night? You can't travel. So understanding that you don't have to completely max out what you can buy is very important. It's something we talk about on those pre-approval calls.
There are buyers out there that actually think that they can affect their payment by just coming up with a larger deposit. Talk to me about the effects of a deposit on a loan.
Definitely. Now, it's something I get all the time, and it's usually framed where someone comes to me and they say, I'm buying this $400,000 home and I'm putting down 5%. So on $400,000, that's $20,000 down payment. If I put down another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, is that going to move the needle? And the answer is no. You're better off not putting that into the buying down the loan. Maybe if you bought down the interest rate, it will have a bigger impact. But I definitely do not recommend buyers to do that. One thing that I get all the time is actually 20% down in PMI. And PMI is private mortgage insurance, which is something that you have to pay. It's mortgage insurance you have to pay until your home reaches 78% loan to value, or 80%. You can request it at that point to come off. And some buyers don't understand how expensive it is, that it's not expensive. If you have good credit, it's very cheap, actually. I'm going to pull up an example of a first-time home buyer who's buying a home he's looking to buy a home at $400,000, and he's thinking about putting 5% down versus 20. Let's see. Here's this breakdown of 5% down right here. Purchase price of $400,000, loan amount of $380,000, 30-year fixed rate loan, and this is his payment with 5% down versus his payment with 20% down. The difference is $330 a month. Now, by putting 5% down, he's keeping about $60,000 in his pocket. He can keep that invested in other assets. You can use that as reserves or savings. Now, if we look exactly at his breakdown in his payment, and I click on more info, his PMI a month is only $95. So his private mortgage insurance is only $95 to be able to save $60,000 in down payment. So over a year, he's paying about $1,100 in private mortgage insurance. Now, how long is he paying that? If his home goes up 2% in value every year, after 5 years, a little over 5 years, his mortgage insurance will fall off the loan. So when I speak to someone and they're afraid about private mortgage insurance, or they don't want to not put 20% down, I bring up this example because if you're only paying $95 a month, over a 5-year period, you're able to keep that $60,000 in your pocket. You can buy another investment property. You can keep it invested in the stock market. And I think that's more valuable than putting the extra 20% down and saving that $330 a month in total payment.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I know you showed me this example before. I was blown away because I always thought that the goal was to get rid of PMI as quickly as possible. But man, I'd rather keep the $60K in the bank.
100%.
Let me reframe that. Not in the bank, investing it.
Yes.
So let's talk about building a team around you before you purchase. How important is it that you have a good team around you in order to complete the purchase?
It's the most important thing. It starts when you find out that you want to buy a home. Finding the right real estate agent that can guide you through the process. That's the quarterback in the deal. That's the person who's going to be able to set you up with a lender, a building inspector, attorney, title insurance, and it all starts there. Now, then you have to look at the whole process. You have to look at a building inspector. You have to get an attorney, a mortgage lender. You don't want anyone that's going to drop the ball. So sometimes I'm speaking to clients and they, are talking about building inspectors and how someone's charging them $300 more. And I always, bring up the cheapest person isn't always the best, because if you save $300 on a building inspection, you buy the home, and then you find out, 3 months later that you need a new boiler that didn't come up because your building inspector dropped the ball. It'd be a $10,000 mistake that, you wanted to save $300 on. Same thing with an attorney. To save an extra $100 or $200, is it worth it? When you're making possibly the biggest purchase of your life, I don't think so. And I don't think cheapest is always the best. And I think having a great team, somebody that, you meet that real estate agent who can assemble a team and bring you from start to finish is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And we, as agents, we have several vendors that we deal with all the time. We know their work, we know their reputation, and it's absolutely critical to have a good team around you. So, Guy, I want to thank you for coming on to our podcast, The Real Estate Dweller. It was a pleasure having you. How do people get a hold of you?
They can reach me on my cell phone or direct line, and that is 860-631-5241, or follow me on Instagram. It's Gaetano_Chambriello. I know that's a mouthful, but that could be another good place to find me. And I had a blast. Thank you for having me on today, Miguel. It
was awesome having you on, and we look forward to continuing working with you.
Awesome.
Take care, man.
Talk to you soon. Thank you, Miguel.
So there you have it, folks. That's the end of our episode. This podcast, How to Purchase a Home Without Going into the Poorhouse. Thank you for listening. For any of your real estate needs, please contact me at 203-650-0151 or through all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or go directly to my website, www.miguelpaganre.com. If you found value, please don't forget to like, share, or subscribe. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Real Estate Dweller with Miguel Pagan. For all of your real estate needs, contact Miguel Pagan at William Ravis Real Estate, 203-650-0151. Join us again next week for The Real Estate Dweller, and let Miguel's 22 years of experience work for you. If it's about real estate, it's all here with The Real Estate Dweller with Miguel Pagan. The opinions expressed are those of Miguel Pagan and his guests, not those of his company or any affiliates.